ladies and gentlemen. We are live on this wonderful episode of the In the Tank podcast. Donald J. Trump has been elected as our 47th president of the United States. Trump's victory comes after a years-long campaign by the media to paint the president-elect as a racist, sexist, fascist, second coming of Hitler. But it looks like the media's narrative completely fell on its face, and it looks like Trump is going to not only win the election, but even lock up the popular vote. We are going to be talking about all of this and more, and maybe what the first 100 days of the next administration is going to look like on episode 472 of the In the Tank podcast.
It's all right. It's all right. I feel that way too. It's all right. We feel that way together, okay? Let it out. Let it out.
Welcome to the show, everybody. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendal. Joining me, I've got a full crew. We're in a bit of a celebratory mood. Maybe a little bit more enthusiastic than that lady in the intro. But joining us, I've got Jim Lakely, VP of the Heartland Institute. He is muted, but I'm sure he's going to take that off before he says anything. How are you doing today, good sir?
I am doing good. I muted it because I was laughing so hard. I hope you enjoyed that little twist to the intro for this week. I did that just for you, Donnie, and for all of our wonderful viewers. And actually, it was Tiny Trump here. Tiny Trump, he talked to me the other day, and he said, you really need to change the intro. Yep, that guy too. So, yeah, it's a good day. It's a good day. It's a good week. It's going to be a good holiday season, and hopefully it's going to be a good 2025 and beyond.
Also joining us, we have Justin Haskins, senior fellow here at the Emerging Issues Center at the Heartland Institute. How are you doing, good sir?
I'm okay. It's a little bit of a mixed bag for me. I mean, I'm happy that things turned out the way they did on election day overall, but I'm a little bit sad that, it's probably the end for Kamala Harris. So, I'm going to miss the cackle. I'm going to miss, the endless gaffes. I mean, she was incredible for material. Like she was just great in that sense,
She was.
Like comparing her to, Joe Biden was in a class all of his own. Yeah, I'm gonna miss it. I'm gonna miss it. I'm gonna miss it. Like Al Gore, I don't miss him.
No.
Like I miss nothing
John
about
Kerry.
him. John Kerry.
It's
Terrible.
unfortunate.
Don't miss anything about him. Barack Obama, no, absolutely not. That guy was a nightmare. But these two, yeah, I'm gonna miss them. They're
I'm sure we're gonna be
they were the best. They were the best at being the worst, and that's
best of the worst.
Yeah,
look at that. Best of the worst. Wearing it right there. Also joining us, we've got Chris Talgo, editorial director here at the Heartland Institute. How are you doing today, good sir?
Doing good. And so I think the thing that I'm most excited about is July 4th, 2026 is going to be a big year, 250th anniversary. And guess who's going to be at the head of that celebration? Donald Trump. Cannot wait.
Oh, yeah. So much to talk about. So much to talk about. But before we get into any of it, of course, I have to put that message out there to everyone, especially those that are tuning into the audio-only version, probably catching the show on a Friday or later. Why don't you leave a review for us in iTunes? That'd be greatly appreciated. And consider joining us a day earlier at Thursdays at noon Central Time, where we are live streaming this on Facebook and YouTube and Rumble and X. Join in the conversation. Throw your comments and questions in the chat. Maybe we'll show your comments on the screen. Maybe we'll address your questions on the fly. Also, help us out. We are demonetized by YouTube, but you can still go to heartland.org/inthetank. Donate to the show directly that way. That way, YouTube doesn't take a 30% cut. Liking the video, subscribing, sharing the content, even leaving a comment under the video, all helps break those big tech algorithms that prevent content like this from being shown to more people. With that out of the way, let's get into it. Like I said, lots to talk about. Something big happened on Tuesday night. You may have missed it. And that, of course, is the fact that Justin and I nailed our prediction. If those people weren't, Andy, I think I sent you the link to that map. You got to show it. For those that didn't watch last week's episode, the last episode before the election, we all did prediction maps, the Electoral College maps. And Justin and I, coincidentally, had the exact same map. And the most marvelous thing about this map is that it is absolutely dead on. Kamala Harris taking home 226 electoral votes. Donald Trump reeling in 312. I think some places don't necessarily have Nevada and Arizona called yet, but I think it's just a matter of time there. So, Justin, before we get into any of the politics stuff, Donald Trump, blah, 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 care to take a victory lap? What do you have to say about our amazing predictive abilities?
I absolutely will take this opportunity to take a victory lap. It isn't easy making predictions going out on a limb, as we both did.
Yes.
But when you're this good, sometimes you got to do it. Sometimes you just got to do it. And so, I feel really good about it. I mean, frankly, this isn't the first time. I actually predicted the 2016 election as well. I don't know if we have that record anywhere, but I got that one pretty darn close as well. So it feels great. I was a little bit worried going into election day that I'd be tired of winning after getting it right, but I'm not. I'm not tired of winning. So we're going to keep the good times rolling. It feels great. Look, the reality is this. The reason we got it right is really what it comes down to is we looked at the poll numbers and we saw that the poll numbers showed Trump winning slightly in most of the swing states and losing very, very slightly in a couple of, I think only two. I think it was Nevada and Michigan. And so we basically just said, look, the pollsters have been wrong. The last two presidential elections, they have overstated the amount of support for the Democrat by usually a few points in almost all the swing states, not all of them, but most of them. And if they just do what they've done the last two presidential elections and we apply that to this time, he's going to win huge. He's going to win in all these states. So we just applied that logic to the map, and we ended up with exactly the result that we said before, because the pollsters are hopelessly biased and terrible. Our good friends over at Rasmussen Reports were spot on in how they predicted the election because they were not infusing their polls with biased analyses and outdated ways of coming up with results. And they weren't relying on faulty understandings about the 2020 race. So, I mean, it just makes perfect sense. The pollsters continue to get it wrong because they really don't understand the American people. And they actually want to give the false perception that Democrats are more likable than they actually are. And that's how we ended up coming to the conclusion that we came.
It's like how did you get it right on the money? How did you get it right? What are you, some type of genius or something? Yes. All right, so let's move on to the actual election results here. So, well, the other thing, I'll toot this horn as well. I made a second prediction on the show last week. I said that this wasn't going to be 10 days out before we know the outcome of the election. We are going to know that night. And I said maybe it'll bleed over into Wednesday, but we're going to know before the next episode of this show. Nailed that one as well. It depends on how late you stayed up, but it was called essentially that night, at least by most places. I myself stayed up till 2:00 in the morning. Actually, I ended up staying up later because of baby not wanting to sleep issues. But I stayed up to 2:00 in the morning when the New York Times declared Pennsylvania for Donald Trump. And that was enough for me to put the phone down and rest easy, knowing that he was going to pick up Alaska, and that would be 270. End of story. So, I mean, Jim, I was sweating it. The reason I stayed up till 2 o'clock in the morning is because I was sweating it the whole time. You know, I was watching Pennsylvania, I was watching Michigan, seeing little minute decreases in his lead. And I was just so worried that if I put the phone down or went to sleep or something, I would wake up to bad news. I did not want that to happen. You guys all seemed confident. I was on a group chat with you and Justin and a few other people. You all seemed confident. So were you sweating it at all that night, or what was your take?
I mean, I was sweating it a little bit. I mean, I thought that the returns coming in were good. I saw I was monitoring Twitter all day. I will say that it's a good thing that our podcast is on Thursdays and not on Wednesdays. I was a little bit tired, let's just say that, on Wednesday because I was up probably until 3 a.m. I wanted to stay up not only to see that the New York Times and others had confirmed that Donald Trump will be the 47th president of the United States, but I also wanted to enjoy the liberal tears on CNN and MSNBC. I don't have cable, but I have a friend who gives me a login so I could watch it on my iPad, and I just kept flipping back and forth between MSNBC and CNN, and it was glorious. This was going to be a historic night. This was going to be a night that I would remember, just like in 2016, when it was the shock to the world that Donald Trump won. But yeah, seeing the early, going into Election Day, the Republicans had done more early voting than they had ever done, and by a long, long way. Actual data was showing that Republicans were doing more early voting than Democrats, especially in the swing states. And the conventional wisdom, even from kind of glum Democrats, was that, holy moly, the Democratic Party is going to have to do an Election Day surge like they've never done in their entire life as a party, and it just didn't materialize. And as the night wore on, it was interesting to see that, yes, a polling company that the Heartland Institute works with, Rasmussen, was one of very few that had this race accurately polled all the way across. I was watching Megyn Kelly's show on YouTube and SiriusXM yesterday, and she was just railing against the pollsters. Oh, we shouldn't believe any pollsters anymore. They're always wrong. All the pollsters got it wrong. And I was like, no, Megyn. Rasmussen got it right. And so, getting all that. So I was, let's just say I was cautiously optimistic, because you just never know what's going to happen. But it was amazing. I missed the mark of 312 by just one. The only state I had going to Democrats that Donald Trump actually got was the state of Michigan. I know that the conventional wisdom, again, is that if you take one of the Great Lakes states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, you usually get all three. I wasn't quite ready to buy that yet. But it's a good day. It was a good night. And look, this was a sweeping mandate for Donald Trump. The real blessing here is that this isn't even remotely close. That we did know on election night, or election morning, if you wanted to stay up till 2:30 in the morning or 3 o'clock, you did know before that you had to go to bed who our next president was going to be. That's the way it used to be in this country. Our vote counting systems, state to state, are still garbage for the most part, except if you live in the great state of Florida. And so we need to clean that up. But it looks like we had an election that was run fairly, that was run transparently, and that reflected accurately, in a sweeping mandate, the will of the people. And that's something to really be grateful for.
Yeah, there's a comment from Peter in the chat here that says, if you fall asleep, then Freddy Krueger will come and dump 1 million votes for Harris.
That's right.
That's exactly right. I would not sleep until I knew that at least the New York Times was calling it. So that was keeping me awake at night. Chris, the other thing, so I was kind of keeping track of the New York Times website, their tracker of all of it. Very detailed stuff. But the page that I kept refreshing religiously was their little ticker that was the likelihood of a candidate winning. And towards the beginning of the night, I don't know if it was 50-50, but when I started paying attention to this little New York Times ticker, I think it was at 60%. And just watching it go up, 61% chance of Donald Trump winning, 62% chance of Donald Trump winning, on and on and on and on. But then it would go up to 75, and I'm feeling confident, and then it would just tick back to 74, and I would panic. Oh no, it's going the wrong direction. You get up to 91%, and then it would go back to 90. Oh no, panic. So like that's how on edge I was all night, despite how everything was turning out. In hindsight, I kind of feel silly about that I was sweating it so much. But that was my feeling. High anxiety that entire night. What was your take on election night?
Okay, so I mean, I did text a couple times with you, and you were asking me early on, like, "What do you think?" And I told you, I said, "I think things are looking good." So this is what I did. I went home, and once they released the exit polls and started to dive into them, to be honest, I was a little worried, and here's why.
Mm.
Okay, because the exit polls can be a Rorschach test for like any and anyone can interpret them in any different way. But okay, so the first one that came out was right track, wrong track. 70% of the people said country's on the wrong track, only 30% right track. I was like, whoa, that's great. That's really great. But then they started really getting into the favorability factor. And when they talked about Donald Trump, I had noticed that he was way underwater on favorability factor. Kamala Harris was, less underwater than Trump. Then they started to go into the most important issues. It was grocery prices and gasoline. Cost of living was the big one. Went into has your life become better or worse the last 4 years in terms of financial? It was vast majority severely worse or much worse. Inflation, same thing. So I was like, wow, these kind of give me like mixed signals. I don't know what to think of it. But what happened was when the rubber met the road and people had to go in there and cast their vote, you know what they did? They said, I don't care about the guy's personality. I care about the guy's policies. And that's what won the day. So I'm just very glad that enough Americans, like 10 million or so actually, said we're not going to vote on this guy's, tweets and some of the things he's said over the years. We're going to vote on the fact that we can't afford to put gasoline in our car and we can't afford to go to the grocery store. And that's what matters. So thank God that the American people woke up and voted with their minds and not their hearts. That to me was the number one biggest surprise. Now, one thing I do want to talk about is, okay, obviously the Republican Party is going to control the Senate, 52 right now, possibly going to get to 53 if McCormick can win in Pennsylvania. I'm annoyed at the House races, and I'm especially annoyed at California because the past couple election cycles, California takes days, if not weeks, to count congressional races. Why is that? Why are the vast majority of the outstanding races that are still not called almost all in California? Now, I'm not sitting here accusing of fraud, ballot corruption or anything like that. But can you please just get your act together so that we can know a couple days after who's going to control the House of Representatives? Because now this thing is just lingering. And when I got to work this morning, I started checking some of the sites, and I don't think we're going to know this for a couple more days at least. In some of the races in California, they've only counted barely over 50% of the ballots. How is that possible? I just don't understand it. Like, Jim said earlier, Florida had almost every vote counted by
an hour and a half.
evening. Yeah. So we knew straight up what was going on there in Florida. I was happy that, Michigan and some of the other Wisconsin, Pennsylvania got their act together and, were able to do that, pretty easily. Arizona took a couple days, but whatever, it didn't even matter at that point. But yeah, I just want some closure on the state of the House because that's going to be a big deal going forward.
Yeah, no, it's Justin, when I was telling you my kind of election night story and staying up till 2:00, sweating it out, whatever, you're like, oh, really? You're like, I was in bed by 10 o'clock. so you were cool as a cucumber, huh? You thought this was in the bag early in the night or what?
What I was most nervous about at first was Georgia. Once we knew that Georgia was good to go, I was never really that worried about North Carolina. But once it was clear that Georgia and North Carolina were, solid, I knew that at that moment, basically Trump only needed to win. There were several different. They needed to win 2 out of the remaining swing states, and there were a bunch of different combinations that would allow that to happen. And I also knew that if he just won Pennsylvania, it was over. So once we reached that point in time where he was leading in Pennsylvania, you had the New York Times saying there's like an 80-something% chance he's going to win Pennsylvania. And if he wins Pennsylvania, it's over. But even if he lost Pennsylvania, there's still several other paths to victory. I was like, I feel pretty good about this. And then by the time we get to 90-something% estimate that Pennsylvania was going to Trump, I was done. So I was in bed.
Yeah.
I didn't see Trump's acceptance speech.
Oh, I stayed up for that.
Yeah, I didn't get that. I didn't. I mean, I really felt very good, probably better than I should have going to. But it just seemed like it wasn't just what we were seeing in the swing states. It was also that across the board, Kamala Harris was losing compared to Joe Biden. She was underperforming compared to Joe Biden basically everywhere. And that is just a terrible, terrible, terrible sign. And as I have said 50,000 times to everyone who will listen over the past year, Donald Trump lost the last election by fewer than 50,000 votes combined in 3 states.
Right.
So the margin for him to win was actually, he didn't need to gain that much ground to win. That's the reality. If he just did slightly better in the right places, he would have won the last time, even with all the other issues. So because we were seeing Virginia much closer than it should have been, he was doing much better in Georgia than he did the last time. He was doing better than a lot of people thought in North Carolina. He was doing better in all these various counties, important swing counties in Pennsylvania and other places. It was like, the odds that she would somehow sneak that out while underperforming in all these other places just seemed so low to me. Sure. That I felt really good about it. And that was why the New York Times and organizations like that were so, why their predictions were 80, 90 something percent pretty early on, because she was doing so badly. This was a total and complete rejection of a person at a scale that you really don't see very often. Just complete rejection of this person.
There was one point. Awesome. There was one point. I'm watching the New York Times, trackers of all this stuff. There was one point when the first batch of votes came in, maybe the first 15-20% came in from Minnesota, and it went from leaning blue to toss up just for like 20 minutes or something. Yeah. And I was just dying. I was laughing so hard. I'm like, if Trump takes Minnesota, this will be like the greatest election of all time.
Yeah. What was funny is they do that stupid Dixville Notch thing in New Hampshire. It's like the first people who the first results are this tiny little town in New Hampshire called Dixville Notch. And there's only like 10 voters or something like that.
Six.
It's like six voters. It's like nobody who lives there. And I think Jim sent a text message to us saying something like, in Dixville Notch, it went from like 5 for Joe Biden and 1 for Trump the last time.
6-0.
So was it 6-0?
6-0 to 3-3.
It was clearly, and it was like, is this a sign of things to come? And obviously it's like half joking. But I think there's some truth in that. I said
landslide. I said it's 3-3 in Dixville Notch. Landslide.
You could take a sample. That was the most incredible thing about this. You could take a sample from almost anywhere, and it showed Trump doing better, and it showed her doing worse. And it didn't matter where in America. In Rhode Island, which is like the most corrupt blue state on the face of the planet. Republicans haven't been in charge of Rhode Island in like 100 years or something crazy like that. And that's real. I think it's like in the 1920s was the last time. They had like 40-something% of the vote went to Trump. It was like the highest that a Republican presidential candidate has done there in forever. I mean, it just was everywhere. It was everywhere. Even in places that still voted for Kamala, it was not to the level of Biden or Obama or Kerry or Gore or any of those people. And it's just, like I said, a rejection on a national scale of a person, unlike anything we've seen in a really long time.
Yeah.
Chat. I'm wondering, anyone that's watching this, I'm curious of kind of your level of anxiety during the night. Scale from 1 to 10. What was the high water mark of anxiety that you were feeling during election night? Put it in the chat. I'm very curious to know. But just staying on this topic of election outcomes and exit polls, I wanted to read some of these findings. So there was a bunch of, I mean, so I'm not an expert in this, the exit poll stuff, and so feel free to hop in and fill in some context in regards to kind of historical comparisons, whatever. But there was a couple of stories that I kind of kept hearing throughout the night when it came to the interesting demographic makeups of some of the votes that were coming in, especially in some of the specific counties. But one thing, for example, according to exit polls in key states, Trump received 46% of Hispanic and Latino votes compared to Kamala Harris's 52. That's only a 6 percentage point difference between those. And that was up from 32% in 2020 for Trump. So it went from 32% in 2020 Hispanic votes for Trump up to 46. That is a massive increase there. And if you break it down by gender, Donald Trump actually won the Latino men vote. 55% to Kamala Harris's 43% of that specific demographic. And in one county in Florida, in particular, that has like a large Puerto Rican population, Trump way overperformed in that county from 4 years ago, flipping that county red, if I'm not mistaken. So that whole story about that one comedian during that rally that said like a joke about Puerto Rico or whatever, apparently that didn't resonate too much. But we'll get to the media's lack of influence soon. Trump's support from black voters went up from 2020, according to the USA Today article, which I don't have in the show notes. Trump only got 8% of black votes in 2020, and this percentage increased substantially to 13% nationally. And the shift was even more significant in Pennsylvania, where black men supported Trump at a rate of 24%. Wow. In that very crucial state, 24%, a rate more than double. More than double 4 years ago. So those are very interesting exit poll results. And then also when it comes to women, Harris carried that demographic only 53% to 45%, only an 8 percentage point difference there. So, I mean, maybe Jim or Chris, one of you can probably fill me in kind of the relativism compared to other Republican candidacies in the past. But from just the basic anecdotal stuff that I've heard, it seemed like Trump did a lot better in those exit poll demographic stuff.
I gotta say something. You're totally right about that. Trump overperformed among almost all the demographic groups. A lot of people thought that this would be determined by women, and Trump actually increased his vote share with women by 3 percentage points. Like you said earlier, he improved it immensely with Hispanic voters. But Donnie, this is what I really took away from the election. It's not about identity politics anymore. You know what it is? It's about the working class. And Donald Trump was able to cobble together a working class coalition that has not been able to be done by Republicans since probably Ronald Reagan in 84, I would say, because George W. Bush was not able to put that kind of coalition together. So for all these years, Donald Trump has been focusing on these common sense issues about, hey, we should stop sending our jobs overseas. Hey, we should stop over-regulating so that companies can't build things here in the United States. Hey, maybe we shouldn't have a wide open border because that actually hurts American workers. All of that resonated so much with such a wide swath of voters. It didn't matter if you were a woman, if you were black, if you were gay, if you're straight, or any of that stuff. All that mattered is if you're saying, hey, you know what? I want the American dream. I want to be able to go to the grocery store and be able to, have some money left over. I want to buy a house. That's what I think that's what this election was really about. It was about, do you want to be able to work hard and, have prosperity? That's what this was about. Now, yeah, there were a bunch of other issues on this, of course, no doubt, freedom and freedom of choice, whether it's, being able to choose what kind of appliance you can have, what kind of car you want to drive, all that kind of stuff. I do think that played a big role. But when you look at the exit polling, one of the big things was the economy, immigration, and crime. those three outweighed abortion. And that's what the Democrats were really thinking that this was going to be all about. It was going to be all about abortion, abortion, abortion. That did not pan out for them. And also, I do think that they're, calling Trump Hitler and Nazi and, dictator and all this stuff. I think it really backfired on them, because one of the other big things from the exit polling was democracy. And on the CNN panel, they were all saying, well, that bodes so well for Kamala, because Kamala is the protector of democracy. But that's actually not what happened, because I think a lot of Republicans thought, hey, wait a second, the Democrats, they're not about democracy. Look what they did with the lawfare. Look what they did with just putting her in charge. Look what they did with, stabbing Biden in the, right in front of the, American people, and ushering in this coup. So I think that backfired on them. And I think that what this really, what I hope this does is this builds a working class coalition that the Republican Party is going to be able to bridge into the future for hopefully, elections to come.
Yeah. It's Justin on this podcast has said a lot that, Trump's big Achilles heel is basically suburban white women. According to the exit polls, he won white women across the country with 52%. 52% of white women in the United States supported Donald Trump for president. And that's despite the fact I live here in Illinois. This obviously the presidential race was not competitive here, and I don't even watch regular TV on my streaming. I'm watching YouTube. Every single commercial was abortion, abortion, abortion. They're going to take away in vitro fertilization and all this other kind of stuff. Well, I guess it turns out that more women are actually concerned about the price of groceries and inflation than they are about abortion, or at least half of them are. Obviously, this election was a referendum on Biden's disastrous economic policy, on inflation being out of control, which was caused by government and his policies, the disastrous border policy. And by the way, Hispanics in the United States are not all for illegal immigration. This is some sort of assumption Democrats seem to make. They don't realize that American citizens don't want illegal immigration, whether they're black, white, or Hispanic, or Asian, or anyone. Illegal immigration causes chaos in our communities, including the Hispanic communities in the border states. And in fact, Biden, I think, Trump won. He won I think a majority Puerto Rican district in the state of Florida, county in the state of Florida. And he also won border counties that are dominated by Hispanics in Texas. And so so it seems like every bit of messaging from the left and from the Democrats fell flat with their demographics. We had a chart up there a minute ago that showed that Donald Trump, with the exception of 2 states, he did better in every single state than he did in 2020, except for, I think the exceptions were Washington State and Utah, where it was a slight decrease in what his performance was in 2020. And some of these states, it's remarkable. Florida, huge increase. Texas, huge increase. New York, New Jersey, huge increases. So he narrowed the gap. And again, Chris is right. These are, middle class, working class Americans. And I really think the real takeaway here is that this was an election where the American people just said, enough with all of this. This was a vote against the insanity of the last 4 years, and to get out of my face with all this stuff already. Enough with the radical leftist agenda in our public schools. Stop weaponizing the tolerance we have as good-natured Americans, and then use that to impose craziness on all aspects of our society, from drag queen story hours to, we went from having the book Heather Has Two Mommies in our public schools, 20, 30 years ago, to now books like Genderqueer, which have graphic depictions of sex in them in middle schools. And people have just said enough. And if you showed up at your local school board to complain about it, the FBI is going to open up a file on you as a dangerous terrorist in America. The tolerance that Americans have, we were told to just accept the unfairness of having biological men competing in girls and women's sports, or else if you don't accept that, you're a disgusting, hateful bigot. That's not true. The American people do not believe that. And they said, enough with that. Americans want to be persuaded of things. They don't want to be forced to do things against their, common sense and nature, just because you're going to threaten with canceling them or some other kind of social cost to it. And I really do believe that this election, I think the COVID lockdowns and the insanity and the lies that this government undertook during COVID, I think there was a big hangover from that still. And people were talking about it, and they're sick of the constant scolding. This election, the American people said, enough with this, enough with DEI, which has turned our institutions from businesses to universities to sports everywhere. It's made them worse. It's led to the decline of these once respected institutions. And the American people said, enough with all of this. Leave me alone. Stop with the nagging. Stop with the racial guilt you're supposed to have because you're a white person in this country. Stop insisting everybody be an ally of whatever the latest leftist political cause is, or else we're going to label you a terrible human being. Enough. All of that stuff is crazy. We don't agree with it, and we're tired of having it in our faces. Now, Justin may think I'm projecting a little bit here because that's what I voted for, but I think the broad rejection of the leftist agenda, there was a chance to do it on Tuesday, and Americans from all over the country, even in blue states, said, enough. We've had enough of this. Your policies are terrible. The way you talk to us is terrible. You insult us. You call this country racist. We do not agree with that because it's false, because that is not what America is. And November 5th, 2024 was when the American people told the Democrats and the left what America really is.
Yeah, you might have actually heard Jim on election night shouting out his window, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore."
Damn right.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that those exit poll numbers are particularly interesting because they just fly so much in the face of just the media narratives that were constructed to undermine Trump in the last few months, particularly, but generally over the last several years. And the entire election was basically built on this idea that Trump is a racist and a sexist. And I think that those numbers that I repeated just kind of showed that people just aren't believing the BS spouted by the media anymore, at least not in the numbers that are enough to sway a majority of the country. And that's including popular vote.
Well,
and Justin, you wrote an article about this. Why don't you give us your thoughts?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I think that the media, I think that, well, look, the article, which was published in the Blaze today, is asking the question, who is the biggest loser in this election? And
Tim Walz. Tim Walz. Was it Tim Walz?
No, definitely not. From my perspective, actually, the Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are nowhere near the biggest losers of this election, which I think a lot of people are kind of surprised to hear that. I think it's a really very obvious who the biggest losers are. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are two people who have absolutely no business being anywhere near the White House. They shouldn't even be allowed on tours to go inside the White House. They should just be kept away like vagrants. Like they have no business going anywhere near there. And yet they became president and vice president, even though they're completely unqualified, horribly unlikable, terrible politicians. Kamala Harris didn't get a single primary vote from a Democrat, despite running twice. She never got a primary vote, and yet somehow she almost became president. From my perspective, that's a huge win. This person should not have been anywhere near the White House, and she almost became president. That is remarkable. That actually, I think, I mean, this is like a handicapped person almost winning a gold medal in a race at the Olympics. Okay. Like, you know, if you get silver,
she's mentally handicapped, but we'll put that aside.
You know, it's still, if somebody with a severe handicap is getting the bronze medal at the Olympics, that's pretty good, you know? So I feel like that's the situation here. I think the biggest losers by far is the media. The media spent billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of airtime, published thousands upon thousands of articles collectively, in probably the most, forget about all the thousands of hours, millions of hours maybe of television over the course of 10 years collectively, talking about Donald Trump as a Nazi, as a Hitler, as his supporters being degenerates and deplorable and trash and, you know, not, again, white supremacists, Christian nationalists, on and on and on. And they did this for 10 years. 10 years. There was one mission over 10 years. It was to destroy one person. That was the mission. If you were to start every single year for the past at least 9 years, if you were to start, probably 10, and you were to go at the beginning of each of those years and go to the heads of all of these news departments and newspapers and everything, and you would say, what is your primary goal? What is your primary hope and dream for this year? It was, beyond their selfish stuff, it would be stop Donald Trump. Make sure everyone knows Donald Trump's the worst. That's like the primary goal. And despite that being the primary goal, all these outlets, hundreds of outlets and newspapers and television stations running nonstop negative coverage about one person, they still could not accomplish the mission of keeping that one person out of the White House. Now, that is incredible, because we're not saying you have to do something, we're not talking about keeping this guy from running a Denny's or something. The bar for getting into the White House, it's really high already. It's really hard. So you would think that if everyone in the media practically was trying to stop one person from getting that job, they would be able to do it if they had any influence at all. And yet they didn't do it. They failed spectacularly. In fact, this was the best election of the three. He's consistently getting more popular with every election in a way. I mean, that's amazing when you think about it. He's getting more and more votes. So what this shows, beyond any shadow of a doubt in my mind, is that the mainstream media is, for all intents and purposes, dead. Now, they're still alive within their echo chambers that they have. And their echo chambers are fairly big. So it's not as though they're completely dead. They're on like life support. But when it comes to their impact and influence on the national conversation, on shaping real results in society, transforming government, doing things like that, it is so obvious and clear that these people do not have the power that they once had before. It's not even remotely close.
Justin.
And they'll never get it back. And just one last thing on that. I think since we talked about the exit polls and all that other stuff, I just want to point something out. The proof of this is in the exit polls, was suggested earlier. What was really interesting is that white people actually voted for Trump at a lower rate than, say, Mitt Romney in this election. So if you go back to Mitt Romney actually did better with white people than Donald Trump. So there is some degree, some of this stuff appears to be working, the white guilt stuff, the DEI stuff, with white people. But when you actually look at the minorities, who you would think would be most susceptible to it, because they're the ones being told that they're the victims and that they're the ones that are being targeted, the support going back to Obama to where we are now has plummeted for virtually every group, except for, basically every group. If you're going back to Obama, I mean, some of the exit polls show, for example, like Latinos. In 2012, for Obama, 71% for Hispanics, 73% for Asians. In this election, it was 52% support for Democrats, for Latinos, 54% for Asians. So we're talking about a 15 plus percentage point decline from Obama to today, despite the fact that the DEI stuff and all the media narratives and the hands up, don't shoot, all of that stuff has dramatically increased. And despite all of that, we're seeing a lot of minorities shift away. Now, white people are actually seemingly not the people who are shifting away necessarily. It's mostly the minorities who are constantly being pandered to, which is just incredible. But it shows beyond any shadow of a doubt is that the media people do not trust the media. We've known that from polls for a long time, but that lack of trust has now translated into the mainstream media is not important in the way that it once was. It's not able to impact people in the way that it once was. And the lack of trust has now reached a level where they can't even stop a single person, despite spending 10 years obsessively doing nothing but that. They can't stop that single person from becoming president. So this is a new era of media, because this is the first time in probably 100 years that what I just said is true, at least 100 years. And so we are entering a whole new era of influence in media, where the Joe Rogans of the world and the streaming services of the world and YouTube and all of that are collectively going to be more influential than these mainstream media outlets in shaping public opinion. And it is thank God for that. That is probably the most important thing to come out of this election.
Yeah, I've got something to say on that, but Chris, you were going to jump in?
Yeah. So just a couple of things. First of all, when you talk about white people, I think you need to differentiate between college educated and non-college educated, because college educated overwhelmingly went for Harris Walz, whereas non-college educated overwhelmingly went for Trump Vance. And Justin, you kind of hit on what I was going to talk about at the very end there. So the mainstream media, I mean, I do watch a lot of mainstream media, MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News and others. First of all, their viewership was down across the board in the 2024 election viewership. So I could completely agree with you that vast majority of people have just lost all confidence in the mainstream media. But at the same time, I think it's interesting that we're seeing this rise of these like alternative medias, whether it's Joe Rogan or all these other podcasts that Donald Trump went on. And when you look back at the campaign, Donald Trump barely did any. He did almost zero mainstream media interviews, especially on MSNBC, CNN, NBC, CBS, and ABC. What did he do? He spent the vast majority of his time reaching out to people who have giant podcast audiences. I did not watch that 3-hour Joe Rogan interview, but I think you can learn a lot more about someone from a 3-hour uncut interview than a 3-minute, prepared interview on ABC or CNN or whatever. So I think that the media landscape is changing. It's changing before our very eyes. I think the rise of social media is also going to be a big part of that. I agree with you that the mainstream media is extremely frustrated. I don't know if we're going to go into this later. I guess we kind of are with the spin and stuff. But it's been interesting to watch the past 24, 36 hours how different the mainstream media is taking this. Sometimes they are getting introspective and saying, gee, how did we miss this? And then other times it's like they lurch the totally other direction.
Oh, we'll get to that.
Okay. So yeah. I do want to just throw that out there. It's been very fascinating to watch.
Well, Jim, I got a question for you, because I'm going to spare our audience. We have a couple of prepared clips. Jimmy Kimmel crying about how this was a bad night for everybody. You got AOC that's talking about fascism on the march and all of that. We'll save the audience for having to deal with any of that. But I have no sympathy for those people, Jimmy Kimmel and AOC and the ladies on The View. I really don't. But you started off the show and had that lady like crying in the intro, right? And there's a million of those videos.
Oh, yeah.
TikTok, Reels, Instagram, all of these people just losing their minds. And I've heard plenty of anecdotal stories of people losing their minds, thinking that like women are not only going to be stripped of like their ability to get abortions, but take like their ability to buy a house and have credit cards taken away from them. Like this idea that like Donald Trump is personally mailing them a Handmaid's Tale, outfits to wear. And it's just like the idea that fascism is on the march and that people are going to be, put in camps, and he's going to start arresting all of his, political enemies. And I just like at one level, I just like shake my head and just like, oh my gosh, you're so ridiculous. But on the other level, I have this like sense of compassion for them. Like I feel sorry, like they were abused by the media. The media has been just like stoking these flames for years and years and years. And I feel like these people like can't help but believe at least some of it. So I have like compassion from these are like abused people. Like I feel like there should be some sort of one of those like lawsuit commercials where it's like, do you think that Donald Trump is the second coming of Hitler? Well, you might be entitled, sir, for some compensation, because I feel like the media should be held to task for this. This is unbelievable that they're just like, the word brainwash gets thrown around a lot, but these people are conditioned to really believe this stuff. And I don't know, maybe it's because, like I'm a father now and I'm a little bit more compassionate or whatever, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
Good for you for being compassionate. And while that, while there are literally thousands of videos that you can see on X that are grabbed from TikTok of mostly women going absolutely batshit hysterical crazy on camera. For one, I don't even understand, why do you film yourself doing this, and why are you sharing this with the world?
Sure.
I think there is to be honest, when you see these things, we have a mental health crisis in this country that is not being addressed. So maybe if there's any good to come out of it, it would be that. But there is no reason for that, for people to be screaming into cameras that, you know, a dark fascist night is now upon us. I mean, there was a clip that went viral of a black woman saying that she thinks that she was afraid to go to bed because she didn't want to wake up tomorrow, and because she might be a slave tomorrow, meaning Wednesday. I mean, this, and the mainstream media is the one to blame, is really the chief one to blame for all of this. As Justin mentioned, they've spent the equivalent of maybe $1 trillion of free media buys, calling Donald Trump and his supporters fascists and Nazis, and someone who's going to take all of your rights away, and like you said, put people in camps. He's going to be a dictator and all of this. But what did we see on Wednesday afternoon? We saw Kamala Harris go out at Howard University, her alma mater in Washington, D.C., and say that she is going to participate in the peaceful handover of power, the peaceful transfer of power to Donald Trump. Now, if it really is the case that Donald Trump is a new Hitler or a Mussolini or some kind of fascist dictator who's a threat to everybody's life and a threat to our way of life here in America, why would Kamala Harris say that? She would say that because not her, not any of her surrogates actually believe that Donald Trump is a fascist and is going to be a dictator for life. Oprah Winfrey in the last rally that she had in Philadelphia, I believe, with Kamala Harris, said that we need to vote tomorrow. We need to vote against Donald Trump, or this could be the last election we ever have.
Right.
Because Donald Trump is a fascist dictator, and he will outlaw elections, and he will stay in office for life. Apparently, I suppose, to pass over power to his son Barron when he is old enough to rule over the United States for the next 150 years or so. I don't know, because Elon Musk will be there to extend Barron's life until he's 205 or something with the new technologies he's bringing about. I mean, we have a mental health crisis in this country because, to be honest, one party and our dominant media have dedicated all of their attention, their power, and their money to making people absolutely crazy by lying to them constantly about the nature of Donald Trump's first presidency. We all lived through it. I don't remember any camps. In fact, there was some disappointment on the right that Donald Trump was not able to accomplish as much as he had promised and that a lot of people had hoped. He did a lot of good. A lot of good policies came out of Donald Trump's first administration. And really, what's actually very exciting about the next 4 years is that Donald Trump, in that Joe Rogan interview, admitted that he wasn't prepared to be president on day one. It's not like a normal politician where they have the full support of the party and they have all these people lined up that have been pre-vetted and are ready to take positions in government and implement the agenda. And we also forget that the Republican Party was not happy that Donald Trump was elected president in 2016. And they spent most of the first 2 years of his administration, the most important 2 years of any new presidency. They spent most of that thwarting Donald Trump's agenda, not wanting to cooperate with him. And so it was amazing that Donald Trump was able to accomplish as much as he did from 2016 to 2020. The exciting thing now is that he is ready and the Republican Party is behind him and the American people are behind him with a sweeping mandate. There is going to be radical change in this country, radical change for good, not concentration camps for media people. And so I hope that, I know this is putting hope for experience, but I hope that the end of this sort of weaponized crazy making by our media will end. I don't think so, but I hope.
Well, wait, before you jump in, there's a comment from it is I2 that says, continue, Jim, need to show this to my extreme left sister. So I've heard like a bunch of these anecdotes of people talking to their friends and family that are just like beside themselves, this fear that Donald Trump is the second coming of Hitler. And I had this thought, I'm glad you brought up the Kamala Harris concession speech, but I think, Chris, maybe you told me that, reportedly Kamala Harris called up Donald Trump to congratulate him, on winning the presidency. And it's just like, why would she do that? If she really thinks that he's Hitler, that he's some Nazi, he's a fascist in waiting, why would you call to congratulate him?
And why would you facilitate his transition? Right.
Are incongruent, right? So to me, the only logical explanation is that she doesn't believe her own rhetoric. They put themselves in a rhetorical corner by going so extreme about him being a fascist, and her congratulating him, calling him and congratulating him was proof that she doesn't believe her own rhetoric. So if she doesn't believe it, none of her supporters should believe it either. So anyone that's so worried that they're going to be marched off into some camp, just know that Kamala Harris doesn't even believe that BS. So that was my last word on that. I do want to go to the next topic, Chris, but if you have any final thoughts on this.
Just a real quick final thought. I think the media deserves, what we're giving them. However, we need to also point the finger at the education system. I'm a former teacher. I was teaching during the rise of Donald Trump, and I cannot tell you how many times these teachers were also literally telling their kids that if you're an immigrant, you're going to be deported and all this crazy stuff. And that's only one part of it. The other part of it is, for far too long in our schools, we've been telling kids what to think, not how to think. So even if the media is absolutely biased, which of course it absolutely is, it would be a check against that is to have a populace that actually is, willing to ask questions and dig deeper. And, one of the things that the founding fathers said is, unless we have a educated, in the classic, definition of that term, populace, well, then we're not going to go very far, because if you are just, being told what to think all the time, you're much more vulnerable to these, media narratives. So I think that's another thing that just needs to be, a part of this. School choice, I think, is going to be a big help for that. Unfortunately, one of the things that happened was a school choice was on the ballot in a bunch of states, referendum style. It got voted down. And that was a big shock to me. Like across the board, school choice did very bad on Tuesday night. I don't know. I mean, there's many reasons as to why that is, but I think that that's another thing that we need to really keep in mind during our, assessment of why people are thinking the way they are. It's not that just because they are, being, indoctrinated by the mainstream media. It's because they've been misled as to how to think critically and, reason and use, all those skills. So that's, I think, a big part of this.
Yeah. We went in pretty in depth on the media and their kind of dwindling influence last episode. So you should check that one out. The last episode before the election, check that out. It's got Bezos' big head in the thumbnail. But we know that the media tried their darndest to get Kamala Harris across the finish line, and they failed epically. We've got a little bit of a prepared montage here. I think this is from the Daily Wire montage of some media meltdowns, reactions. This all plays into the idea of like, well, what's the left's narrative on this? Where are they going to go? Are they going to be introspective? Are they going to, maybe we were wrong to kind of push these policies? Are they going to double down and start calling all of the country racist and sexist? I think this is the reactions on election night, and it might offer a little bit of insight in the direction they might be going. So let's go ahead and play that clip if we have it ready, please.
This is the biggest red wave I've seen since Ronald Reagan's 49-state victory.
There were appeals to racism in this campaign, and there is racial bias in this country, and there is sexism in this country.
I can't help but wonder if the American people have given up on democracy.
I hear what you're saying, and I do see it differently, because I'm thinking about the people who are not a part of anybody's elite, who are hurting tonight.
If you were a 6'4" white man from Arkansas or from, Florida, do you think she would be losing by that much?
I think that we've got to be honest. Among Hispanic men and black men, there's a lot of misogyny.
There are African-American women who know a little bit about being talked down to and know a little bit about having their economic dreams crushed, who tried to dream a big dream over the past couple of months.
It's not enough to get enough white women to vote for Vice President Harris, a fellow woman. This will be the second opportunity that white women in this country have to change the way that they interact with the patriarchy.
There's misogyny, but it's not just misogyny from white men. Mm-hmm. It's misogyny from Hispanic men.
Right.
It's misogyny from black men.
And tonight they're trading in a lot of hope for a lot of hurt. And
Oh,
they
Van
were
Jones.
hoping that maybe this time,
This guy was a 9/11 truther.
This
by the
time.
way, so that everyone remembers.
one of their own could be seen as worthy.
Things we've all been talking about, who do not want a
Look at
woman
Mika in all
leading
black.
them. Might be race issues with Hispanics. They don't want a black woman
She's wearing a
as
cape.
president of the United States.
To all the pollsters, the election pollsters, blow me. I don't
Oh,
ever
Jon
want
Stewart.
from you again, ever.
People who said that he was a Hitler lover weren't Democrats, they were Republicans. People who said that he was a fascist weren't Democrats, they were Republicans who worked for him.
You gotta be kidding.
Oh, Justin, what do you think? What are you putting your money on in Vegas? You think they're gonna pull back some of their more radical perspectives and try to be the more moderate conservative, or do you think they're just gonna try to power through and push this narrative that it's all just misogyny and racism? That's what's keeping us out of the ballot box. What do you think?
Well, I hope that they go the misogyny racism route because frankly, that's the one where we all have more fun. And it's also just, I think, a main reason why they're losing all these elections and they just keep doing it. It's unbelievable. So I think it's incredible to see a guy like Joe Scarborough, a rich white man, go on television next to a rich white woman and tell Hispanic men that they're probably misogynists and also racists. And it's like, and that's the reason why they voted, because of their misogyny, their pro-white guy misogyny and racism is the secret reason that they voted. It's just like, this is the whole point. You people are completely out of touch with reality. And the reason that a lot of people are voting in opposition to the narratives that have been imposed on them, in the case of a lot of Hispanic voters and a lot of Asians and other people, is because they do not believe any of these things are true, because it's just not part of life. It isn't real. No one would think these things if they weren't being told them by the media. Like, that's the reality. Almost no one would believe in this concept of like systemic racism and all of this stuff if they weren't being told it. I really believe that that's the case.
It's an inability to take any self-responsibility. They're trying to just push it. It's not because we're like horrible at reading the room or we have our finger the furthest from the pulse of anything. It must just be racism. We didn't figure the misogyny. We didn't think it big enough, to apply to all the other.
Yeah, and the racism thing is especially crazy because minorities vote, he did much better with minorities. And so again, it's like you're now telling the minorities that they're racist. You're the white guy telling the minorities that they're racist for voting for a white guy, and that's why that this whole thing happened. It's like that's like mansplaining it with race. It's like the racist version of mansplaining. And it's just like I thought we were supposed to be against that. I thought we were supposed to let people give us their truth and experiences and all this crap. No, I guess not. I guess when they tell us their truth, we're supposed to say you're a racist and a misogynist and move on. But to answer your question of like, well, what do I think will happen? I mean, I'll be honest, I'm really struggling with this. They are in the left, the Democratic Party establishment, the people who are in charge of figuring out, where do we go from here? They're in a absolutely horrible situation. And I truly do not know what I would advise them to do that's realistic for them to do. So what they should do is move to the center. That's what they should do. They should follow the Bill Clinton model and move to the center and become we're the old school Democrats again. We're not those crazy people who you think we are, because that's the way we've behaved for the past 15 years. We're now the Bill Clinton people. We're, working class, pro-union, anti-establishment, anti-big corporations, people. We don't have any, we're not really into a lot of social issues and stuff like that. Like, they need to go back into that. And if they did, I think they would do very, very well, because I think there are a lot of moderates in the middle who still feel more comfortable voting for a Democrat if the Democrat isn't crazy. There's just not many people in the Democrat Party running for powerful positions who aren't insane. So they don't have a lot of options. I met a guy at a birthday party, children's birthday party, this past weekend. Guy, I told him I was in politics and whatever, and then public policy. And he told me, I never have voted for Republicans up and down. I'm a registered independent. I vote, sometimes for Democrats, sometimes for Republicans. I've never voted for all Republicans. He said, this was the first election in my life. And, he was like a guy in his 40s or 50s. First election in my life where I just didn't even have to think about it. Went straight down the ticket, all Republicans. And the reason was simple. The other side is insane. And I can't do it. They're too insane. And I think there were a lot of people who feel that way. So that's what Democrats should do. The reason they can't do that is because their most politically active segment within the Democratic Party is the craziest. And
they're the loudest.
They're the loudest and the craziest, and they're in control of the media. And they're never going to do any of that. They're never going to move to the center. They probably think, that the center is racism too. Like, they could never go back. They'll never do that. So of the realistic options, the only thing that so this is what I think, if I'm going to put my money on it, this is what I think the battle is going to be next time around. I think next time around for the Democrats, the internal war is not going to be, should we move to the center? Nope, that's not possible. And it's not going to be, obviously they know they can't go like the Joe Biden route again, like the old white guy who can't remember anything. Like, they have to pick somebody who's a little more, who's younger and energetic and all of that, but and I think this is going to be the debate. Will it be a more establishment Democrat type who can present themselves as being a moderate, but isn't, because they'll never pick a moderate. So it has to be someone who pretends to be moderate, but isn't. This is like Barack Obama. Okay. Barack Obama was not a moderate, but if you go back and you watch his speeches and stuff like that, he presented himself that way. So that's an option. I think the other option, and I've already started to see this happen. We haven't had a chance to talk about this off air yet, but I've already started to see this happen, is the Bernie Sanders people have made a really big push. They even put out press releases and stuff like this in recent. Bernie Sanders himself put out a press release, as well as other groups, basically saying that, yep, we knew that this was going to happen because you guys abandoned the working class democratic socialism model. And that was really popular with all the demographics that just so happened to now vote for Donald Trump. So what we need is a left-wing populism, which is like the Bernie Sanders model. It won't be Bernie Sanders because he's too old, but the Bernie Sanders model. And then I think on the other side, you're going to have, no, we don't, we need a more traditional establishment type candidate who's a real progressive, but who can pretend not to be a progressive. And I think this is going to be the future debate between the two. It's the socialists are going to use this as an opportunity to say, we're the only people who can appeal to these working class people who hate the elites. We can appeal to them. You elite Democrats can't appeal to them, but the Bernie people can. And we need another wave of Bernie Sanders-like socialistic policies and people. And that will be the battle, I think, in the future.
Chris, you've probably watched some CNN and MSNBC in the aftermath of the election. Do you get any sense of the direction that they're heading in rhetorically?
Yeah, I got some thoughts on this one. Okay, so election morning, meaning Wednesday morning, it seemed for the first hour of Morning Joe Scarborough, Mika, and all those people, that Joe was actually getting a little introspective and asking, man, why did we lose, with black men and Latino men and all that? That lasted literally for like 45 minutes. And then he just, like the whole show, for the most part, went just totally nuclear into, we must stop Trump. Trump is a dictator. Trump is a Nazi, strong man, all that stuff. Okay, so then when I got home last night, I flipped on MSNBC, like, around probably seven-ish, and they were still doing their election coverage, like, with Joy Reid and Chris Hayes and all those people. And wow, it was stunning. They were not even trying to understand why their candidate lost so massively. It was totally 100%. We must stop the strong man. There's a dictator who's about to come into office. We must fight. We must rise together. Please do not get apathetic at this point, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, whoa, I guess they're going to go in that direction. And here's why I think that it's particularly interesting, because after 2016, when the media got it totally wrong, for about a week or so, it seemed like they were trying to understand. Remember, I think the New York Times actually came out with like a big article saying like, we need to understand what's going on. Why were we so off? That lasted maybe like a week or two. So I think this is going to last even less. And, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. For 10 years now, as Justin said in the beginning of this, these people have been obsessed with, denigrating Trump and his supporters. That's not going to change. There's no way that's going to change. I think they're going to double, triple, and quadruple down on this. And I think it's going to blow up in their face even more, because it would be probably a better business model for them to try to move back to the center, to try to understand, why people are making the decisions that they're making and all that. They're not going to do that. No way. It's not going to happen. I'm already seeing it happen. I'm already seeing them just, like dig their heels even deeper. It's
right. It's a rhetorical corner they paint themselves in. How do you compromise and work with Hitler? You can't do it.
Right. They can't just come out and say, oh, hi, everybody. Just kidding. For the past, 10 years, we've been calling this guy Hitler, strongman, Nazi, and, fascist and all this. But actually, we were totally making that up because we wanted to win the election. And he's actually kind of like, just not that bad. And he's going to work with the transition team. President Biden already asked him to come to the White House to start the transition process. So once again, Donnie, if the guy coming in is Adolf Hitler, why would you facilitate the transition process? I don't understand that.
Right.
So it just goes to show how empty their rhetoric is, and I think how desperate they were. But I don't think that the mainstream media, the MSNBC, CNNs, ABCs, the usual suspects, are going to change their tune anytime. I don't think so.
Jim, final thoughts on this topic. Oh, classic Jim. Classic Jim.
Classic Jim. All right. Pardon me for muting as I was typing something out. So anyway, as Justin was mentioning, that the media landscape has changed and it's not going back. I saw a story this morning from the Hollywood Reporter that this was the lowest percentage of American households watching the returns on traditional television since 1960. 1960, not everybody had a television. It was still a relatively new technology, and it was expensive, and a lot of people couldn't afford it. So the lowest percentage of households in the United States watching the returns on TV since 1960. It was the lowest total number of people watching on television, just as a raw number, since they started tracking that back in 2000. It is obvious that the mainstream media is dying. They're like the Sixth Sense. They're walking around and they don't know they're dead. They need to be told that they're dead so that maybe they just go off to the great beyond. But people are finding their own options on streaming to consume news. And I watched the Blaze TV on election night. I didn't watch the cable networks until I wanted to see and to enjoy the lamentations and the crying that was going on those networks. And just one last little data point. I mean, CNN's audience from the 2020 election. For the 2024 election, their audience was cut almost exactly in half. So the old media landscape is gone. And they think they still have this influence, and they do have a pretty malign influence, obviously, among a lot of Americans, but it is going to, it's going to continually decrease. This is the last election in which probably even half of Americans will be watching the returns on a traditional network.
Jim, just one thing on that. So I don't know. Do they count if you're watching a premium channel, but you're not watching it with like your cable box? Like I cut the cord many years ago. I have DirecTV. So that just gives me a lot of those channels, but I'm pretty sure that I don't actually count as a viewer of Fox or CNN or MSNBC because I'm not, I don't have my cable connection any longer. Do you know the answer to that?
Well, I don't know the answer to that specifically. The Hollywood Reporter story did show that streaming services like CNN Max recorded its best day. I didn't know the CNN Max existed, but it recorded its best day ever.
Yeah, it lives under HBO Max now. Yeah,
right. So it's not exactly clear, but what is clear is that the traditional way of sitting in your living room and putting on NBC, ABC, CBS to watch election returns is the worst year that's ever been for that, and by dramatic numbers. And so I think that trend is going to just accelerate.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know what the left's going to do. I feel like they're going to double down. That's my own take on it. We are so long in the tooth on this podcast, but we have one more topic. Donald Trump's first 100 days. Admittedly, I have no insight into this. I consider thinking about his first 100 days as kind of counting my chickens before they hatch. So this topic hasn't even occurred to me until he secured the election on Tuesday night or Wednesday morning, whatever you want to say. So this is more of a wish list for me about what I hope that his first 100 days looks like. But before I get into that, Chris, do you real quick, let's make this like a rapid fire kind of question. Do you have any insight on what is going to be like kind of priority one when it comes to Donald Trump in his first 100 days? What areas that
I know exactly what he's going to do. You ready?
Go ahead.
Just go open Project 2025, page 1, and start reading. It's that simple. Just kidding. No, what he's really going to do is, I think it's going to boil down to the border. Obviously, he's going to want to secure the border. Obviously, he's going to want to revamp the energy production. I think those are going to be the two big ones. And I think that we're still going to have to wait to see what happens with the House, because if the Republican Party does have the House and then they have, control of both houses of Congress, his first 100 days could be FDR style. I mean, this could be really, really, big time. So
right.
I'm just going to have to say, kind of, leave that out there.
Well, on the New York Times tracker for the House, during the podcast, it went up to 207 seats called for Republicans to 209. So just over the span of our podcast, it's gone up 2 seats for Republicans.
Good.
Justin, thoughts on what you're hoping that he's going to prioritize in the first 100 days, or any insights into what they're actually going to prioritize?
Well, I think the main priority, a lot of this does depend on what happens in the House and to some extent in the Senate, obviously, because especially in the Senate, you really do need a lot of support to get things through, and you can't even get past filibusters in the Senate without getting 60 votes. And so there's a lot of issues with getting things passed. So the first 100 days is going to be mostly focused on executive orders. And I think there's going to be a variety of things that they do. I think one of the big things is going to be, as Chris said, domestic energy production, doing everything they can to try to shore that up by reducing the wait times for leases for oil and gas development. They're going to be reaching out to a lot of these companies, these businesses that are in the oil and gas industry, and saying, look, like we're open for business again. We want you to really be aggressive. We want to try to do everything we can to help the refineries and help the processing and all of this stuff. Pipelines that have been delayed by the Biden administration or outright rejected, I think they're going to be taking a hard look at that, is going to be a big part of it. And I think the idea behind this energy production stuff is not just that it's going to generate jobs and help the economy grow and all of that, but I think this is going to be viewed as one of the main ways to combat inflation. Because if you can bring energy prices down, then you can bring prices overall down, because energy is associated with the price of virtually everything. So I think that's going to be a huge component. I think another really big thing, which is not necessarily an issue that we cover a lot on this show, but a big thing is going to be trying to end that war in Ukraine. With Russia and Ukraine, that's going to have massive impacts on all sorts of other issues, including the economy, because the global economy has been shaped in a massive way over the past few years by that war. And if that war can end quickly, I think, and that's what Donald Trump says he wants to do, then I think you're going to see the stock market and investors and businesses, especially multinational corporations, and the energy industry is heavily involved in that one as well, respond very positively to that. So I think that is also going to be a huge priority. Of course, you're going to have lots of appointments and things like that is a massive part of it. Another thing that I'm hoping that they do is deal with the ESG issue. A lot of that can be done through executive action. The Biden administration, when they came into power, started undoing a lot of the anti-ESG policies that have been put into place by Trump. So I'm hoping that very quickly, early on in the Trump administration, he's going to go back and put those things into place. He's promised to do that in regards to ESG in banking, ESG in public pensions, and other things. So I think that would be a really huge step forward. So there's going to be a lot of action here. Most of it is going to be on the executive order side of things, a lot of regulation cutting, a lot of pro-energy policies. What I hope to see, but I don't think we'll see, is a real solid attempt at reducing government spending. I don't think that's going to happen. That's not Donald Trump's priority by any means, but I think that government spending is the main reason why we have an inflation crisis, because we have to print lots of money in order to keep paying the bills. And if you really want to reduce inflation over the long run, cut government spending. And I really hope that that's the direction they go in. I don't think that's going to happen, but I hope that they do. So I think that's just a preview of everything. Someone should also have a sit down with the two oldest Supreme Court justices, Clarence Thomas and Alito, and remind them that this would be a good opportunity to retire and ride off into the sunset, so we can get a couple more young conservative justices on the bench. I would even let them pick their replacements. I think that would be a nice gesture.
Well, I can say pretty conclusively that Justin, I don't have anything to say that Justin didn't already say. So, Jim, final thoughts on this, and we'll wrap up the show.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously one of the first things he's going to do probably on day one is pull us out of the Paris Climate Agreement again for a second time, and then we're never going back. Probably end all these offshore wind leases that are killing marine life and are an eyesore and are not producing reliable energy and are polluting our beaches. I believe the American people are behind that, so that could be done. I was reminded on Twitter after the election that Senator Ron Wyden of your Oregon up there, Justin, introduced a bill to expand the Supreme Court to 13 members. I think maybe, and Chuck Schumer supported it as well. So maybe we'll bring that up again. That would be nice. No, that would be bad. I oppose it even when the left was going to do it, but I just find that hilarious now. They're going to run away from that like crazy. It would be actually nice if in the first 100 days he instructs the Department of Education before he dissolves it entirely to withhold any federal funds from any public university that has implemented DEI. You either dismantle it entirely and fire the people that are in your DEI offices at, say, the University of Oklahoma or something like that, or you don't get any taxpayer money. So that's the way it is. So if you want to do DEI, do it on your own. Have your state make up the difference. Elon Musk has said that, he said he wants to basically be the Grim Reaper for the federal workforce. I'm totally for that. He can go in there, at least half the federal workforce, and he said it in a nice way. One of the stump speeches he did in Pennsylvania. Look, thanks for your service. Here's 2 years severance. Good luck to you out there in the private sector. You're not needed here anymore. You're not productive here. Go be productive in the private sector. We need more people doing jobs like that as well. That would be wonderful to see. It's going to be actually kind of funny to watch the media lose their minds over things like that. But that's one of the great things about this election. And when I was worried that Trump might not win in the week leading up to the election, I was like, what a missed opportunity this was going to be, to have Elon Musk go in there. And he may not succeed. I think he will try, but this would be the only attempt in our lifetimes to actually reduce the power and scope, size, and personnel of government. And now we have a chance to do that. And I think that's really fantastic. And then finally, he can implement, just as Joe Biden reversed every Trump immigration policy and border policy that he could in the first 100 days, Donald Trump can put it right back in there again. And he can do things like close the border, find those who snuck into this country, especially the criminals, identify them and deport them right away. Day one, start doing it immediately. I think, this is a chance. Again, he was not really prepared in 2016 to be president and to implement policies as president. He is 100% knowledgeable and knows what to do and how to do it. And so it's going to be probably the most exciting first 100 days of our presidency we've seen in a long, long time.
Donnie, I got one more thing I got to add in there. He's got to fire Chris Wray day one. Day one, got to fire that guy.
All right, well, like I said, very long in the tooth on this podcast. Thank you for sticking around for this episode. Please plan on joining us next week for a new episode of the In the Tank podcast. For those audio-only listeners that are catching the show probably on a Friday or later, leave a review for us on iTunes. That'd be greatly appreciated. And consider joining us a day earlier on Thursdays at noon Central Time, where we are live streaming this on Facebook and YouTube and Rumble and X. You can join the conversation. Throw your comments and questions in the chat. Maybe we'll share your comments on the screen. Maybe we'll address your questions on the fly. You can also support the show, but not by super chats because YouTube has demonetized us, but you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate directly to the show. That way YouTube doesn't take a 30% cut. And you could also help out the show by hitting that like button, subscribing, sharing this content, and leaving a comment under the video. All those things help break through those big tech algorithms that prevent content like this from being shown to more people. Feel free to follow us on Twitter at InTheTankPod, and you can send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to the show by emailing us at inthethankpodcast@gmail.com. Jim Lakely, where can the fine people find you?
At J Lakely on X, at Heartland Inst on X, and always visit heartland.org.
And Justin Haskins, same question.
At Justin T. Haskins on X and justinhaskins.com.
And Chris Talgo, what do you have to pitch today?
Well, I don't do social media because I love my privacy, but I do love reading good books. And this new book that just came out is called Propaganda Wars. It's really worth reading. So go to Amazon and buy the book.
That is a good thing to pitch. There's Jim's camera is showing it right there, Propaganda Wars. But why don't we all end the show by just saying, bye, Kamala Harris. So long. I know you wanted to be a part of our lives, but we reject you. So long, Kamala Harris. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week.